Corrupt perspective, thinking and feelings and actions. The word corruption is used so extensively and in so many contexts that its meaning has become obscure. Hence, corruption is usually and wrongly equated with mere financial scams, bribing, kickbacks, etc. Actually, the corruption is as ubiquitous as life and the consciousness. The degree of degradation, influenced by the surroundings and influencing the surroundings as well, in one's own eyes, either consciously or subconsciously and knowingly or unknowingly, determines the degree of corruption, one's perspective, thoughts, feelings and actions. The environment and this corruption further interact and influence each other continuously. The corruption of the leaders in different fields in the world and that of the followers also influence each other. Thus the corruption of the political, religious, intellectual, industrial and other leaders in world can influence the corruption of an individual in any and every part of the world. Perspective is like the space of consciousness. If the space of consciousness is normal, then perspective is universal or normal. The degree of restriction of that space of consciousness determines the degree of the suffocation and throttling of consciousness and perspective also. The degree of this suffocation and throttling corrupts perspective proportionately. Thus, as the space of consciousness goes on getting restricted and perspective goes getting deteriorated, you start getting separated from nature, world, countries, religions, regions, provinces, sects, linguistic groups, castes, communities, creeds, sects and even your own family. The disease of corrupted perspective is subtle and hence not easily noticed. Since the medial systems today have not learned to diagnose and treat the disease, namely corruption of perspective, they do not identify and treat this disease, which often inflicts the medical systems themselves. Sectarian and corrupt perspective makes your thoughts, feelings and actions also increasingly mean, lowly, weak, inert, grumbling, intolerant, inconsiderate, resentful, vindictive and miserably selfish and pathogenic, many times concealed under deceptive glamour and glitter, for yourself and the society. For example, the paradigms or premises of the sectarian supremacy, racial superiority, financial expansionism, religious imposition and so on, without concern for the well-being of the entire world, constitutes corruption of perspective. What is corrupt thinking? The holistic perspective or normal perspective, as gets corrupted, diseased and degenerated, gradually becomes increasingly narrow, sick and sectarian. From this sick and sectarian soil of corrupt perspective, the sick and sectarian, corrupt thinking germinates. Everything holistic gets degenerated into everything sick and sectarian. The rationale behind the international and national laws, conventions, traditions, rules, pacts, in tune with the above perspective, to a greater or lesser extent, without concern for well-being of the entire world, constitute the corruption in thoughts. The racially discriminating constitutions, the legal discrimination on the basis of castes, legal yet unjust tax system / to exploit certain section for the benefit of another section, the repressive laws against trade, shops and such commercial activities, the legalized destructive promotion of alcohol, the various laws and rules with respect to special economic zones and so on are examples of corrupt thinking. The present sectarian medical and education systems, conspicuously lacking integration and productive domain respectively, are glaring examples of corrupt thinking. The so-called corruption, embodying mere financial scams, bribing and even other corrupt activities, is actually crude symptom of the deeper disease, namely corrupt thinking, which in turn is the crude symptom of deeper disease, namely corrupt perspective. What are corrupt emotions? The motivation behind the literature, art, media, movies, dramas, advertisements and so on, serving the sectarian aims, petty objectives, and vested interests ingrained in the above intellectual themes, without concern for the welfare of people at large or even at the cost of the welfare of people at large, constitute the corruption of emotions and instincts. What are corrupt actions? The actual laws, literature, art forms, media campaigns, movements, and such every activity in different fields, either organized or unorganized, without concern for the welfare of the world or at the cost of the welfare of the world, constitute the corruption in actions. Considering the extent of corruption from the brief discussion above, it should be clear how corruption is really ubiquitous, that is not only outside but within me as well. The roots of the corruption thrive from the faulty perspective from which the corrupt thoughts, emotions and actions spring. Hence to rectify corruption, mere physical actions, emotional hue and cry and intellectual jargons, even though they may constitute an inevitable phase in the groping crusade against corruption, and knowingly ignore the roots of corruption and hence are not enough. They cannot effectively blossom the global perspective and global conscience. For this that is to rectify, repair, restore, regenerate, rejuvenate and effectively blossom the roots of global perspective and global conscience, the answer is Namazmaran. It is said that Namazmaran breaks open the throttling shackles, which restrict the space of your consciousness and thereby effectively treats the corruption of your perspective, corrupt thinking and corrupt feelings and actions. This universal solution Namazmaran, which encompasses all visible and invisible contingents, if practiced universally, is said to rectify, repair, restore, regenerate, rejuvenate and effectively blossom the roots of global perspective and global conscience and cure the subsequent fallouts of ubiquitous corruption thinking, feelings and actions, right from its roots. This point of view, however, like any other viewpoint, needs verification on a massive scale. As the experiment does not involve invasive techniques, is absolutely non-traumatic, is totally non-toxic, and is completely non-expensive and does not poke or interfere with any belief system, it should be acceptable to everyone, belonging to all beliefs and non-beliefs. Dr. Kashalikar.